social unrest, immorality, wars and rumors of wars, pestilence. Are these signs of the coming of the end of days, or simply the end of a cycle? Let's talk about it. You know, a lot is going on in the world today. Again, there's wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, social unrest, many things, which is leading people to conclude, unfortunately, that the world is coming to an end. I'm here to tell you that the world is not coming to an end. What is coming to an end is a cycle of time and a way of doing things according to that particular cycle of time. What I want you to get out of this video today is an understanding as to why we're going through these things, why the situations that are taking place in the world today are taking place, and what is on the horizon for us moving forward. Okay, so the first step in this process is that I must give you kind of an understanding of what we call the precession of the equinoxes, or this 25,000 year cycle that represents the precession of the equinox. The ancestors of ancient Kemet, ancient Sumer, the Indus Kush, the Mayans, they all recognize this 25,000 year cycle of human existence. And they believe that human beings, as vessels of the source consciousness, continuously reincarnate through different periods of time within the cycle, seeking a completion of experience. The reason why it was important for these particular traditions to recognize these cycles is simply because during the changes of these particular cycles, there are certain things that take place upon Earth. No different than the seasons. You know, when you are enduring the season of the winter season, there are certain physiological changes that takes place that impacts your well-being on Earth. So it's important for you to know when those seasons take place. The same is true with the precession of the equinoxes and this 25,000 year cycle. It was important for the ancestors to recognize these cycles, to understand and prepare for the various changes that takes place on Earth as a result of this particular cycle. But anyway, the ancestors recognized this 25,000 year cycle we call the precession of the equinoxes. Now, real quickly, and I'm not trying to get into too much detail about this, but the precession of the equinoxes is the result of the Earth's, what we call axis change in orientation as it moves through the through the ecliptic. Okay, so now the Earth wobbles, spins on its axis, and then of course it goes around the sun for approximately 365 days. And in that process, as it goes, it wobbles and it creates a cycle of 25,000 years as it gradually moves through the ecliptic. The Earth axis changes orientation through the ecliptic, and it completes the cycle in approximately 25,000 years, approximately 26,000 years, to be exact, 25,920 years. Now, wherever the Earth axis is oriented within the ecliptic, whatever astrological sign it is pointing towards, we would consider that astrological sign to be the ages of men. So in other words, wherever that axis is pointing, we would consider that the time, the astrological sign that governs the particular time that we're in right now. So like for instance, the axis is pointing towards the age of Pisces, or the astrological sign of Pisces, and therefore will tell us that we are functioning through the age of Pisces at this time. So that 25,000 year cycle also represents a expression of these astrological signs that make up the different periods within that particular cycle. Okay, so you have 25,000 years, but each of those years, each of the periods that make up those years are governed by a specific astrological sign. Okay, now within that particular concept, and we're not going to get into detail about this now, we're going to do it later, but within that concept, the ancestors recognize what we call a descension, so an approximate 12,500 year descension period and an approximate 12,500 year ascension period. All right, and so that period was very important for them, and we'll go into detail about that later, for them to also consider social changes that needed to take place in order to support those specific changes that takes place with that particular process. Okay, so now let's reiterate before we move forward. So we have this 25,000 year cycle that the ancestors represented, that recognize. You are continuously reborn into this cycle to continue to get your life experience moving towards a specific completion. I have a video on reincarnation within my site here, so please go ahead and check that video out. Second point is that this 25,000 year cycle, the different periods within this cycle are governed by a specific astrological sign. And that's what we call the ages of men. Right now we're in the age of Pisces. We're gradually moving towards the age of Aquarius. Okay? And last but not least, this particular phenomenon is created by the Earth wobble and change of the Earth's axis, the orientation of the Earth's axis within the ecliptic. So now let's discuss consciousness. You know, consciousness is a very complex concept. I am not going to sit here and say that within the next 2 minutes I'm going to give you complete understanding of consciousness, because that would be a flat out lie. But what I will just kind of do is describe to you kind of consciousness just enough for you to get some understanding of what it is. Okay, and at the end, it's very important for us to understand the concept of consciousness in order for us to understand why we are enduring some of the changes that we're going through today. So what is consciousness? Consciousness is that part of your being that gives you the sense that you exist, that gives you the sense that you are aware, that gives you the sense that you are present. For instance, if somebody was to take a switch and turn your 5 senses off, turn your mind off, so to speak, you would still be aware that you exist. Even though you may not understand the exact nature of your existence, you would still be aware that you exist. That entity that gives you the sense of awareness, that gives you the sense that you exist, is what we call consciousness. All right? Now, what is consciousness responsible for? Consciousness is responsible for your judgment, your perception. So it's your judgment about the things that you experience. It is also responsible for reasoning, and the reasoning process leads to a specific decision. So consciousness is responsible for your judgment and perception and your reasoning and decision process. Okay, now, consciousness is something that cannot be turned off. It cannot be turned on. Even if I was to take your physical body away from you, your spirit, your kaibit, the manas, the mind, if I was to take everything away from you, you would still be conscious. It's just that your consciousness wouldn't be limited. You would still be aware that you exist. This awareness cannot be turned on. It cannot be turned off. It cannot be destroyed. So therefore, in essence, you are immortal. Even though, unfortunately, you allow the illusion of your mind and the illusion of your physical body and the things around you to give you the false conclusion that you can be destroyed, that you can die, that you can come to an end. But the fact of the matter, the entity that gives you that sense of consciousness, the sense of awareness, the sense that you are present, cannot be destroyed. It cannot be turned off. It was here before the beginning of time. It was here before anything was created. And it will be here soon after the last day. All right, now, this consciousness, which is responsible for reasoning, which results in a decision, all right, exists in this concept we call ma'at. So the ancient Commissions described ma'at as this organization of diverse things to fulfill one objective. And that's really the foundation of intelligence. I will be doing a video on ma'at just to kind of give you more of a detail on that. But just bear with me for this particular conversation. It represents the concept of all things are created to serve a specific purpose to fulfill the one objective. And when we bring these things together to fulfill one objective, you have an organism of order. Now, all the things that will typically be defined as ma'at, lawfulness, justice, harmony, and order, are simply outcomes of order. So we're not saying anything different here. The fact that ma'at represents this order, anything that takes place within this order creates the outcomes, creates specific outcomes, which has been defined as ma'at. But anyway, I don't want to go into detail about that. I want to kind of stay on point here. When you have order and then you have conscious entities functioning within this order, creating, making decisions, going through this reasoning process, creating decisions, they are functioning within a defined order, and therefore they are producing what we call outcomes. Outcomes of either disharmony and harmony. As a matter of fact, the concept of Ma'at creates a measurable relationship between outcomes and actions. That's really one of the major reasons it was created, is to allow us as expressions of the source consciousness to act as gods or behave in a manner to which we are in control of things around us. But again, that's a whole other conversation. But my point is this. What we want to understand is the relationship between consciousness and Ma'at. All right, and how consciousness can be somewhat good at making decisions that bring about harmony, or can be somewhat not so good at making decisions that bring about disharmony. So the relationship between consciousness and Ma'at is something that's very important for you to understand when we discuss the cycles of time and the cycles of men. The ancient Hindu called it Dharma. You know, the lawful expression is what we call Dharma, where man, or as a conscious entity, is trying to live in harmony with Dharma. In ancient Kemet, we would say that we're trying to live in harmony with Ma'at. Now that we understand the concept of consciousness and the concept of consciousness and its relationship to Ma'at, or its relationship to Dharma, now we must go through the understanding of the concept of phases of consciousness. So in this 25,000 year period, the ancestors recognized four different expressions of consciousness that is experienced through this 25,000 year astrological experience. And what they recognize is that on the descension, consciousness will descend from the highest expression down to a lowest expression where it's not able to manifest harmonious decisions within Ma'at. And for each phase, they came up with a name to identify that particular phase. We know these more famously in the Hindu phase, where we call them Yuga phases or Yuga cycles. And of course, the highest Yuga cycle is what we call Satya Yuga. Second one, moving down, going into a descension, is the Treta Yuga. And then, of course, we have Dwapara Yuga. And then last but not least, we have the Kali Yuga. In ancient Kemet, we had the Amen Dai, May Dai, Eb Dai, and then, of course, Camp Dai. But again, these terms are simply defining the reality of consciousness as it descends. Just a quick note, some civilizations believe that not only does the Earth rotate around the sun, but the sun and its galaxies and its planets rotate around a galactic center, which also creates an ecliptic. And therefore, in this particular manner, when the sun and its planets are closest to the galactic center, consciousness is at its highest. So therefore, we would consider that the Satya Yuga phase, or the Amen Dai phase. And then, of course, when the sun and its planets evolve furthest away from the galactic center, we would consider that the Camp Dawi phase, or the Kali Yuga phase of consciousness. So this movement of the sun and its planets towards and from the galactic center creates this concept of heightened awareness of consciousness and lowest expression of consciousness. And then, of course, you have all the things that are in between. So as we move forward here, now, the Satya Yuga phase, or the Amendawi phase, consciousness is 100% active. It has 100% access to its powers. It is autonomously able to function in alignment to Ma'at, in alignment to Dharma. There's no thinking to it. Its automatic response is harmony. It is harmony. The next phase is what we call the Meidawi phase, the Meidai phase, or the Treta Yuga phase, by which now consciousness is 75% active, 25% ego. Now there's a battle going on. It's still able to manifest Dharma, but there's a process that has to take place in order for it to manifest harmony with Dharma or manifest harmony with Ma'at. The third stage is what we call the Ebdawi phase, or the Dwapara phase, where now consciousness is 50% conscious, 50% ego. So now there's a complete war going on. So now there's a small need for assistance outside of man to bring them into harmony with Ma'at and harmony with Dharma. In the higher phases, there's no need for external forms to assist man with manifesting in harmony with Dharma and harmony with Ma'at, because they are functioning at a conscious level where they're able to do it on their own. But once you get to the Ebdi phase and the Dwapara phase and lower, there becomes a growing need or more social forms to help manage this particular state of consciousness. Last but not least, we have the Kali Yuga phase or the Kamdali phase, which is the phase that we're currently in right now, and that's what we're going to discuss. In this particular phase, consciousness is only 25% active. Now you got 25% active, 75% ego, or in what we call 75% Sahu. Now, in this particular phase, it is almost impossible for these particular individuals, or the people that are functioning at this level of consciousness, to live in harmony with Dharma alone, or live in harmony with Ma'at alone. So now these particular people are completely dependent upon the social forms around them to help them live in harmony. And so that's something that we're going to continue to discuss moving forward. But I just want you to kind of understand these particular ages of consciousness that the ancestors recognize for particular periods of consciousness that takes place within these particular astrological phases that we are going through. So you have your ages of Aquarius, your ages of Pisces, your age of Aries, and so on and so on. But these particular ages are taking place within a specific phase of consciousness that also defines the nature of the people and how well they're able to make decisions. It is important for you to understand this particular reality. All social forms, no matter what period of time within any epoch, are there to serve the needs of the specific consciousness that is functioning in that society at that time. I want to say this again because it's very important for us to understand. All social forms, religion, family structures, society structures, and so on, are engineered to support the nature of consciousness. Now, if you're studying history, it is wrong and impossible for you to compare a civilization that is 5,000 years and their traditions and things that they're doing to the traditions of now, because these traditions are different, and the reason why they're different is because they are supporting a different nature of consciousness. And this is why it's absolutely incorrect. Well, it's not incorrect. I guess they can do it, but it's absolutely counterproductive, if you will, for Egyptologists, for instance, to go in and study ancient Kemet under the pretense of Islam and Christianity, to pass judgment on those traditions in comparison to their own traditions, simply because they don't understand that there was a world before Islam and Christianity that lived in peace and harmony. As a matter of fact, within that 25,000 year cycle, there's always been peace and harmony. It's just manifesting in different ways because they're serving different expressions of consciousness. As a matter of fact, most Occidental religions unfortunately believe that man was born, Adam and Eve were born approximately 6,000 years ago, which puts them in a state of not understanding, not grasping that, yes, Christianity and Islam are very good religions for this particular period of time, but that wasn't the case. There were other traditions that were here that did a phenomenal job prior to the advent of Christianity. But as consciousness starts to descend and change into different states, the social forms are no longer supportive of that level of consciousness. So now, when you're trying to maintain a level of harmony with this consciousness, so like for instance, in the Kali Yuga phase or the Kamdali phase, consciousness is only 25% active, 75% ego. So again, as said before, this particular expression is completely, does not have the ability to live in harmony with Ma'at without something outside of them doing it for them. So within this particular tradition, you'll start to see different expressions of God. So whereas in other traditions of the past, their understanding of that reality was quite different from this particular time frame, because you are serving different expressions of consciousness. So in the Kali Yuga phase or the Abdali phase, because consciousness is only 25% active, you need external forms of worship because these particular people cannot grasp abstract things on their own. So therefore you need external forms. So therefore in this particular period, you would have the birth of the monotheistic anthropomorphized expression of God in the form of a man. And I'm going to do another video on the God concept versus the source consciousness concept. So stay tuned for that video. But anyway, so you'll have these different traditions. In this particular tradition, because you have to grab people, organize them, bring them under the authority of one king, because, you know, in this particular tradition, or in this particular time frame, since consciousness is only functioning at 25%, it needs to be organized and brought under the authority of people who are able to make decisions in alignment with Dharma, or in alignment with Ma'at, and therefore utilize their understanding to put forth social systems that protect the ignorance of the people from each other. In this particular phase, the Kali Yuga phase, or the Kamdali phase, you know, consciousness functioning from that 25%, what we're saying is that the majority of the people functioning at this time are functioning from this reality. Now, if we go back to the Sattva Yuga, or the Satya Yuga, or the Amendi phase, then what we're saying there is that the overwhelming majority of the people of that age are functioning at their highest capacity. So moving back down to the Kali Yuga phase, or the Kamdali phase, in this particular phase, only 1% of the people are able to live in harmony with Dharma. And within these systems, it's important for that 1% to be in leadership. So typically, what you should have is the 1% going out, conquering people, bringing them under the authority of one entity. And then from that entity, they are able to manage the decisions of these people through policies and things of that nature, by which overall harmony with Dharma, or harmony with Ma'at, is maintained. But the point I want you to understand is that in this particular phase, you'll have the dominance of what we call moral codes and ancillary do's and don'ts that people are asked to follow, but they're not asked to understand. And that's very important for us to understand right now. You have to create these social control mechanisms, these forms, and then you have to protect them by punishment, you know. And so within this particular industry, you will have these moral codes: thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, steal, and, telling people how they should live. Man should, be married, blah, 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 blah. And you have all these different traditions that are simply built to support that level of consciousness. Again, the understanding is these people cannot make these decisions on their own, so therefore you need something else outside of them that is driving these decisions, that has the understanding to live in harmony with Ma'at, or live in harmony with Dharma. Now, these societies work, listen to this carefully, these societies work as long as the leadership is moral, as long as the leadership is in understanding of Dharma and is in understanding of Ma'at. Now, imperialistic societies were not created by Europeans. The ancient Cometians had to use force to bring everybody under the concept of the government of ancient Egypt. All right, but the early kings in ancient Egypt were considered sage kings, and therefore they were able to maintain a level of harmony through their rulership in that Shechem of King of Kings process. However, in our current state of affairs, our leadership is not understanding of Dharma, or is ignorant, and therefore these systems start to fail when that takes place. And that's essentially what we're seeing at this particular point. So anyway, this particular system is dominated by monotheistic religions, by which these religions are what we call imperialistic religions. So they go out and conquer people and bring them under the authority. All right. In these particular traditions, the masculine element is held to the highest esteem, because the masculine energy is something that is necessary for success in this day and age, because not only are you going out warring with people, conquering them, bringing them under your authority, but then you also have to maintain consistency and continuity with these moral codes and laws through punishment, even in most cases physical death if necessary, to make sure that people who witness these things follow these codes. So within this particular system, the women, unfortunately, are pretty much relegated to being simply the head servant, if you will, within this imperialistic system. And therefore, they are heavily, if for lack of a better term, disenfranchised through this particular period of a time within this Kali Yuga phase, or this Kamdawi phase. And that's something that we want to understand, because a lot of the changes that we witness today is really because women are revolting and going through a revolution, and so on and so on. So anyway, that's where we are right now in the Kamdawi phase, or the Kali Yuga phase. And therefore, in this particular phase, what is necessary for success is to have these moral codes, backed by punishment, to have external idols and things of that nature, to have the masculine energy in a dominant position so that it can do what it does. And these are all necessary. So I want to be clear. I'm not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong with Occidental religion, that there's anything wrong with religions like Islam and Christianity, because they have done a phenomenal job for the past 1,500 years or so, serving the consciousness that they were created to serve. But unfortunately, we're going through a transition in time right now where we've already transitioned into that Dwapara phase, or that Abdawi phase, where consciousness is now 50% active. Well, now that consciousness is 50% active, the social forms that they are being born into is representative of that 25% consciousness. So therefore, you're getting this social unrest as the consciousness of the millennials and the Generation Y are not able to function within these social forms that were built for the 25%. So what you have is this social unrest coming about as a result of this transition. So even though we're on the cusp of the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius, we have already transitioned into the Dwapara age, or the Abdai age, by which these new kids that are coming through are functioning at a different level of consciousness. And as a result, they are bucking the system. So you're telling them through moral codes and things of that nature that this is how it is, where they are looking for understanding. So they're bucking those traditions. So you see women now bucking the primary traditions that they have been handed, as far as being subservient and things of that nature, and they're using their sexual energy to create this revolution, which seems immoral to us, but in actuality, it's the right thing to do. At the same time, you see these kids pretty much bucking all of the social forms that are based on the past, because they're functioning at this different level of consciousness. And so that's what I want to say today. What eventually will happen is, as we go through this transformation, because we're moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, and we're in that Dwapara phase, or in that Abda phase, where consciousness is 50% active, what eventually will happen is that these social forms will transform themselves to function in accordance to this new consciousness right now. But a lot of the things that you're seeing right now, it looks very immoral. It looks like a lot of social unrest, but in reality, it's just simply the social forms that these particular entities, these people, the millennials and Generation Y, are coming into is not fitting of their consciousness, and therefore they are bucking all of the traditions that have been handed to them, which looks severely immoral, but in fact, in actuality, it's just speaking to the antiquated nature of these social forms that we have been experiencing up until this point. Keep in mind, all societies are born to support that specific consciousness and die when that consciousness transforms. So there are all the other past philosophical traditions and religious traditions, societies, things of that nature. They simply have come to support that nature of consciousness, and then of course they have ended when that nature of consciousness has transitioned. So there's nothing new. There's a good book called The Admonitions of the Sage. is a Kemetic book where it talks about this guy who is observing some of the things that's going on in ancient Kemet and comes to the conclusion that the gods must have abandoned ancient Egypt. But in actuality, he's just talking to the fact that, hey, consciousness is changing and therefore you have social unrest. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Is the social unrest is coming from the fact that these kids are functioning from a different vibration. And therefore the social forms do not fit their level of consciousness. We must go through a change in order for us to get to that point. In the new cycle, you're not asking people to follow moral codes. You're not asking them to follow ancillary do's and don'ts. And if they don't, they get punished. You're asking them to understand. In this new phase, the Abdari phase and the Abdai phase and the Dwapara phase, there will be equanimity between man and woman. Okay, man and woman will be adjacent to each other. They'll be at equal par, because the societies that are born in the age of Aquarius demand the woman's presence. In order for you to have success in those particular societies, the female has to be at par or equal with man. Now, I hate to bust the bubble of some of the feminists out there, but the next phase that we go through is not going to imply that women are going to be above men and therefore rulership over men. We're going into a 50-50 concept by which eventually we will arrive at complete adjacency, by which there's equanimity between man and woman. The societies that are coming in the future are going to need the power and force of the feminine, and they're going to need the power and the force of the masculine. In this prior phase, there was need for equanimity between man and woman. What was needed at this particular point was the force of man to govern people, to manage people, to beat people up, to punish them, to hold them accountable. And so it was kind of imbalanced. Whereas in this next phase, there's a need for balance. And so that's what we're going to. The fact that it may look like women are trying to take over men is simply because women are coming from such a severe deficiency by which they have been really, ruled incorrectly, if you will, for the past close to 2,000 years, that it looks like they're trying to take over, but in actuality, they're just bringing us back to equal standards. And they're using their sexual energy as a way to balance things out. But again, this is something that the ancient Cometians wrote in their stories and predicted and told us about 5,000 years ago. So it's nothing that's surprising to the sexual revolution that women are going through at this particular time. But hey, let me get off this microphone because I can talk about this stuff all day. Hopefully this gives you an understanding of what's going on and the fact that we're ending one cycle and going into another. And hopefully that gives you kind of peace of mind and understanding, and hopefully gives you the ability to prepare yourself for this change and align yourself and align your family to take advantage of this new social structure that is coming forth, so that you can have success and enjoyment as we move forward in this particular epoch. Again, I hope this helped you. If it did, feel free to share this with your friends. Subscribe to this channel so you can get updated on my other videos. I will be doing a video on the difference between source consciousness and the God concept, because I think the source consciousness is the understanding of the source consciousness is what we're going to be moving into. So please hit the subscribe button if you want to get updated on when that video and other videos will launch. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Once again, let's continue to grow our light and master our method. Peace.